Welcome to a special edition of AI Unraveled. I'm your host, Etienne Newman. For the last 3 years, we've heard the same headline: AI passes the Bar Exam and AI scores in the 99th percentile of the SAT. It felt like the machines were running out of things to learn. But last week, the world's top researchers, led by Texas A&M and the Center for AI Safety, decided to stop playing games. They released humanity's last exam. It is 2,500 questions long. It covers things no single human could ever know, from the intricacies of medieval Hebrew pronunciation to the physics of sesamoid bones in hummingbirds. And the result? The AI models that we thought were approaching AGI are failing miserably.
This episode is sponsored by DjamgaMind. Stay ahead of the expert frontier with 60-second audio intelligence at DjamgaMind.com.
Today we are looking at the AI ceiling. We're going inside the exam that was built to protect the expert frontier. Let's unravel why the machines are finally meeting their match.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are stepping into our roles as senior AI research analysts from the AI Unraveled network, and we're bringing you a journey into the absolute bleeding edge of machine cognition.
Yeah, it really is. It's a genuinely fascinating time to be analyzing this space.
It totally is. And we are taking a massive stack of sources today. I mean, we've got a 2,500-page academic evaluation published in the journal Nature, comprehensive reports from Texas A&M University, and some incredibly heated, deeply philosophical Reddit threads.
Oh, the Reddit threads are fantastic.
They really are, and we are distilling it all down for you. So if you are a fellow learner who wants to understand exactly where the frontier of technology actually sits today, you are in the right place.
Absolutely. We are looking at a monumental project known as Humanity's Last Exam, or HLE. And our mission today is straightforward but, profoundly important.
Right. We need to critically examine this massive benchmark to answer the ultimate question. Are the tech giants actually building artificial general intelligence, or have they simply spent hundreds of billions of dollars to scale up what are essentially very expensive, highly articulate parrots?
That really is the multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it?
It is. And to set the stage for you, I want to introduce the central mystery that we are going to be unraveling throughout this deep dive. Let's call it the Biblical Hebrew Syllable Challenge.
Ah, yes. That is a perfect anchor point for this entire discussion. It beautifully encapsulates the exact problem researchers are wrestling with right now.
Right. So I want you to imagine a multi-billion parameter AI system. This is a digital brain that has effectively ingested the entire internet. It can write flawless, complex Python code in seconds.
You can summarize a 50-page Byzantine legal document instantly?
Exactly. But when this same digital behemoth is asked to analyze a single, very specific line from Psalms chapter 104, verse 7, it completely and utterly breaks down.
Just totally fails.
Yeah. Meanwhile, a human expert in ancient linguistics looks at that exact same line and finds the logic to be entirely sound and deducible. Why does the machine fail where the human succeeds? Okay, let's unpack this.
To understand why the machine fails at the Biblical Hebrew Challenge, we first have to understand the existential crisis currently facing the entire field of artificial intelligence research. And that crisis is something we call benchmark saturation.
Let's define that for the listener. What exactly is a benchmark in this context, and why is it saturated? Because when I hear the word saturated, I just think of a sponge that can't hold any more water.
That's actually a great analogy. Think of the trajectory of AI research over the past decade as a relentless, accelerating cycle. Researchers create a novel computational benchmark, essentially a highly complex, standardized test.
Right, designed to test the absolute limits of what a machine can do. That's the sponge.
Exactly. Historically, we had standardized evaluations like the massive multitask language understanding exam, widely known as the MMLU.
Right, the MMLU.
We also had the Graduate School Math 8K, or GSM 8K, and the Human Evil for coding.
So these tests were the gold standard. For a long time, if an AI couldn't pass the MMLU, it wasn't considered frontier. They were these impassable barriers.
Precisely. They were the epistemological dividing lines. They were what we use to demarcate human cognitive flexibility and expert-level academic synthesis from mere machine pattern recognition.
So it separated the real thinkers from the calculators.
Right. And if you think back just a few years ago, AI models were scoring in the 30 or 40% range on the MMLU. It felt like a safe, distant horizon.
But over the last few years, we've hit a wall. The landscape of AI is experiencing this destabilizing phenomenon of benchmark saturation.
Yes, contemporary large language models, or LLMs, and these massive multimodal neural architectures, are now routinely achieving accuracy rates exceeding 90% on these legacy evaluations.
Wait, let me push back on that for a second. If an AI scores 90% on a graduate-level math test or aces a standardized bar exam, isn't that proof that it's incredibly smart?
You would think so.
Because you can't just guess your way through a graduate physics exam. Why is this a crisis? The natural assumption for anyone reading the headlines is just, wow, the AI is a mathematical genius.
You would absolutely think so. And that is the exact illusion that has captured the public imagination. But it is a massive problem for the scientists trying to measure true intelligence.
How so?
This unprecedented success rate has paradoxically rendered these tests completely obsolete as precise scientific instruments. When state-of-the-art systems effectively conquer a benchmark, the metric loses its foundational utility.
Because it's saturated. The sponge can't hold any more water, so you can't use it to measure a flood.
Exactly. The benchmark can no longer distinguish between models that possess profound, generalizable reasoning architectures and those that have merely internalized vast swaths of their training data.
Ah, I see it. They've memorized the study guide.
That's it. They are using parameterized memory retrieval and sophisticated statistical guessing.
So they aren't reasoning through the physics problem.
No. If a question, or a variation of that question, existed anywhere in the trillions of words the AI was trained on, the AI didn't solve it, it just remembered it. Let's look at the GPQA Diamond subset as a prime example of this dynamic.
Okay, the graduate-level Google-proof Q&A benchmark. And this test focuses exclusively on the hard sciences, right? Physics, biology, and chemistry.
Yes. And the Diamond subset represents the 198 absolute hardest questions culled from that broader corpus.
Right. The GPQA was supposed to be the new, incredibly high bar. The questions are designed so that even if you give a smart, college-educated person access to Google and 30 minutes to search for the answer, they still shouldn't be able to get it right.
Exactly. And the statistics on the GPQA Diamond are honestly mind-blowing. Our sources show that when you give this test to human domain, people with PhDs in these specific fields actively working in the discipline.
What do they score?
They score around 65%.
Wow, only 65% for actual PhDs.
Yes. And when you give it to highly skilled, internet-equipped, non-experts, people who are allowed to spend half an hour researching a single question, they only get 34%.
Because the questions are so difficult, so esoteric, that even with the entirety of the internet at your fingertips, a smart layman cannot figure it out without the foundational, interconnected knowledge of a PhD.
Exactly. But then you look at the modern AI models evaluated in 2026. GPT-5.2 achieved a staggering 92.4%.
That's insane.
And Claude Sonnet 4.5 hit 100% on the GPQA Diamond. They absolutely destroyed it.
100%. That beats the human PhDs by 35 points.
And this is where the illusion of intelligence becomes highly dangerous.
Let's break down that illusion, because it's not just that they are smart or dumb, it's about how they arrive at the answer. If a human gets 100% on a PhD physics test, we know how they did it. They deduced it. How is the AI doing it?
Despite their incredibly sophisticated capabilities, large language models fundamentally operate as advanced prediction engines. In skeptical academic circles, they are frequently characterized as fancy autocomplete.
Fancy autocomplete. I love that term.
It's accurate. They calculate the probabilistic distribution of the next token in a sequence. They aren't thinking in the way you or I think. They are engaging in parameterized memory retrieval.
Hold on. Explain that like I'm 5. Parameterized memory retrieval sounds like something out of a sci-fi novel.
Sure enough, think of it like this. When you ask an AI a question, it doesn't ponder the meaning of the words. It takes your words, converts them into mathematical values, and maps them onto a massive, multidimensional web of associations it built during training.
Okay, so it turns my words into math coordinates.
Right. It finds the coordinates of your question and statistically predicts what words should physically follow those coordinates based on the billions of texts it has read.
So when they hit that 100% on the GPQA Diamond, it indicates that for narrow, clearly defined scientific queries, the best LLMs have successfully synthesized their training data better than a human can synthesize their own memory.
Exactly. But it doesn't mean they possess fluid intelligence. They don't have an internal model of how the universe works. They just have an incredibly accurate map of how humans write about the universe.
And the stakes here are not just academic. We need to bring this to your doorstep as the listener because this ties directly into the global economy. Analysts in our sources have drawn incisive parallels between the current fervor surrounding generative AI and the technological hype cycles of the past.
Specifically, the dot-com bubble of the late 1990s and early 2000s.
The comparison is highly relevant, and we should explore why. During the dot-com era, the sheer undeniable potential of the internet drove massive speculative financial investments into companies that possessed little more than a domain name and a theoretical business model.
You had companies like pets.com going public and achieving astronomical valuations simply because they had a .com attached to their name.
Right, and we all know how that ended, a spectacular market collapse. Trillions of dollars in paper wealth vanished overnight. Now, the internet did eventually transform the global economy. Obviously, we use it for everything today.
But the immediate claims of its capabilities in 1999 were vastly overstated compared to the infrastructure that actually existed.
And we are seeing a very similar frenzy right now with large language models. The private sector has poured hundreds of billions of dollars into scaling these models.
We're talking about the massive $110 billion OpenAI funding round.
Let's pause on that number. $110 billion.
It is an almost unfathomable amount of capital flowing into a single technological bet.
For context, that is a higher valuation than Ford Motor Company or General Motors. The financial markets demand constant proof of progress to justify that kind of capital.
Investors aren't throwing around hundreds of billions of dollars for a slightly better chatbot.
No, they are investing because they believe AGI is imminent and that it will replace massive swaths of human labor.
And that macroeconomic pressure has elevated the importance of benchmarks from mere academic curiosities to critical indicators of corporate valuation.
This is the crux of the issue. If the benchmarks like MMLU or GPQA are flawed, if they are saturated and easily gamed by statistical guessing, the entire economic foundation of the current AI boom is called into question.
If we are just scaling up expensive parrots, that $110 billion valuation looks very shaky.
It really does. The immense financial investment necessitates empirical, rigorously adversarial validation of their capabilities, not just reliance on legacy tests. Which brings us to the sheer volume of information we are trying to parse today to understand this crisis.
We are going through a 2,500-page Nature paper, reports from Texas A&M, and deep academic critiques.
Now, ironically, evaluating whether AI can actually process complex information takes humans thousands of hours of reading. And since you and I don't have a multi-billion parameter brain to instantly summarize 2,500 pages, we rely on tools that do exactly that.
That's a great point.
Staying on top of these 2,500-page academic findings is impossible for a human, which is why we're sponsored by DjamgaMind. They turn this level of expert knowledge into 60-second audio briefs. It's exactly the kind of practical, symbiotic use of technology we're talking about today.
So in response to this critical measurement gap, this fear that we are flying blind economically and scientifically, a global consortium of researchers and academic institutions decided they had to build the ultimate test. They needed a sponge that could absorb the ocean.
This is the genesis of humanity's last exam.
Yes.
I love how dramatic that title is, Humanity's Last Exam. It sounds like a sci-fi movie where we have to prove our worth to alien overlords. But it really is the level 100 dungeon for AI.
That's a great way to put it. The conceptualization was spearheaded by the Center for AI Safety, or CAS, and Scale AI.
It was conceived as a necessary corrective scientific measure against the superficial mastery of legacy benchmarks.
It was essentially the brainchild of Dan Hendricks, the director of CI, alongside Alexander Wang of Scale AI. They also had substantial contributions from researchers like Summer Yu, Long Fan, and Nathaniel Ai.
They looked at the saturated scoreboards and realized that a radically new approach to testing machine intelligence was required. What fascinates me about this is the sheer scale of the effort.
It was massive.
I spent hours last night just looking at the logistics of how they pulled this off. It wasn't just a small team of Silicon Valley engineers sitting in a room trying to be clever. CAIS and Scale AI initiated a massive global crowdsourcing effort.
They went out and solicited highly complex, closed-ended questions from nearly 1,000 subject matter experts.
And these weren't just casual internet enthusiasts or Wikipedia editors.
No, this consortium was primarily comprised of tenured professors, academic researchers, and graduate degree holders affiliated with over 500 academic and research institutions across 50 different countries.
One of the key figures highlighted in the Texas A&M report we reviewed is Dr. Turing Nguyen. He's an instructional associate professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at Texas A&M.
He personally authored 73 questions for this exam.
73. making him the second highest author overall, and he wrote the most questions in the math and computer science categories.
Think about the intellectual horsepower required to sit down and write 73 questions that are designed to intentionally break the smartest machines on Earth.
It's staggering, but to ensure they were getting the highest caliber of difficult, truly exceptional academic problems, the organizers put a massive financial incentive on the table.
They realized that asking PhDs to do this for free wouldn't yield the volume or quality they needed. So they created a $500,000 prize pool.
$500,000 just for writing test questions.
Exactly. This financial structure awarded $5,000 to the authors of each of the top 50 most challenging and rigorously verifiable questions.
And then $500 to the authors of the subsequent 500 questions.
Which is an incredible motivator. Imagine you were a PhD student working on some hyper-niche subfield of quantum mechanics, struggling to fund your lab.
Suddenly someone says, if you can write a question about your thesis that tricks an AI, we'll give you $5,000. You're going to pull out all the stops.
You're going to dive into the most obscure, difficult, multi-layered problems you can think of.
And that is exactly what happened. But the most fascinating part of this methodology isn't just how they gathered the questions, it's how they threw most of them away. We need to detail the adversarial filtration process, because this is where HLE separates itself from every other benchmark in history.
Right, because getting 70,000 complex questions from PhDs is impressive, but it's not the final exam.
The defining methodological feature of humanity's last exam is its rigorous adversarial filtration mechanism.
During the development phase, they amassed an initial pool of over 70,000 trial submissions, 70,000 highly complex questions.
Wow.
To distill that massive repository down, every single proposed question was systematically tested against a suite of the most advanced frontier artificial intelligence models available at the time.
They brought out the heavy artillery. They ran these 70,000 questions through multimodal LLMs like GPT-4o, Gemini 1.5 Pro, and Claude 3.5 Sonnet for anything requiring text and image comprehension.
And for text-only queries, they used OpenAI's dedicated reasoning models, like O1 Mini and O1 Preview.
And the inclusion criteria were absolutely unyielding.
If any single frontier model could generate the correct answer to an exact match question, or if a model performs statistically better than random chance on a multiple choice question, the prompt was immediately discarded, instantly thrown in the trash.
Wait, really? If even one AI got it right by a fluke, it was gone.
Gone. So out of 70,000 initial submissions, they whittled it down to 13,000 after an intermediate expert review, and finally landed on just 2,500 questions for the finalized HLE dataset.
The test was mandated to be essentially LLM-proof.
That is brutal. They basically said, if the machine knows it, we don't want it.
Furthermore, the questions were explicitly required to be Google-proof. A model with internet access could not simply scrape Wikipedia or a digital encyclopedia to find the solution.
The questions demanded genuine, multi-step deductive reasoning and the synthesis of disparate pieces of highly specialized knowledge.
Now, this ruthless methodology didn't go unnoticed by the public, and it sparked some fascinating philosophical debates. Let's talk about the Reddit threads.
Yes.
Because whenever you publish a 2,500-page Nature paper claiming to have stumped AI, the internet is going to dissect it.
There's a brilliant critique from a user named Orame that we found in our sources. They pointed out what seems like a massive, glaring logical flaw in the whole enterprise.
They noted that the paper explicitly states questions are rejected if LLMs can answer them correctly. Orame argued that this is a bit of a circular approach.
You are building a test strictly out of questions, and AI has already failed, just to prove they fail it.
It is a highly valid epistemological critique. Let me play devil's advocate here on behalf of Orame. If I give you a math test, and before I hand it to you, I test you on every single concept. Any concept you know, I remove from the test.
Yeah.
I only leave the concepts you've never seen before. When you score a 0, I turn around and announce, look, they know absolutely nothing about math.
That's completely unfair, right? It's a rigged game.
On the surface, yes. If you pre-filter a test to only include failures, a 0% pass rate is a foregone conclusion, not a scientific discovery.
However, the counter-argument, which is the entire justification for why this benchmark is so necessary, is that because of benchmark saturation, this is the only way left to find the frontier.
How do you mean?
We already know the AI can pass the normal tests. We have mountains of evidence that they can ace the MMLU and the GPQA. We don't need another test to prove they know the established, highly documented facts of the universe.
We need to map the negative space.
Exactly. We have to find out exactly where the edge of the cliff is, and the only way to do that is to throw out everything the AI already knows how to walk on. We are trying to find the boundary of machine cognition.
Okay, that makes sense. You aren't testing to see what it knows. You are trying to precisely locate what it cannot do. Which brings us to the actual contents of this ultimate dungeon. What survived the purge?
The taxonomic breakdown of the 2,500 questions is bizarre, rigorous, and completely fascinating.
The composition of humanity's last exam reflects a deliberate architectural emphasis on structural reasoning and mathematical logic over rote historical memorization.
Mathematics comprises the largest plurality of the exam, accounting for 41% of the dataset.
41%. Why is math weighted so heavily? Why not equal parts history, literature, and science?
Because advanced mathematics serves as the ultimate, unambiguous test of rigorous, multi-step logical deduction. Unlike historical facts, which an AI can just retrieve from its training data, a complex mathematical proof cannot be memorized and regurgitated if the variables, constraints, or topological spaces presented in the prompt are entirely novel.
Give me an example of the kind of math we are talking about, because we aren't talking about calculus or trigonometry here.
Far from it. They had questions delving into the highly abstract domain of category theory, asking the computational model to process sets of natural transformations between functors.
Or topology questions involving non-Euclidean spaces where the AI has to mathematically prove a theorem that has never been written down before, using a set of rules just invented in the prompt.
You either possess the internal cognitive architecture to execute the multi-step logical reasoning, or you don't. Rote memorization cannot save you.
Beyond the math, the breakdown is wild. You have 11% humanities and social sciences, testing philosophical logic and literary deconstruction.
10% chemistry, 9% biology, 9% physics, 7% engineering.
And then you have 4% dedicated to other specialized subfields, which includes things like niche legal frameworks, obscure epigraphy, and ancient languages.
And that brings us right back to our anchor from the introduction.
The Biblical Hebrew Syllable Challenge.
Yes, let's dive deep into this, because this is the perfect illustration of the humanity embedded in this exam.
We pulled the exact prompt from the Reddit discussions and the Texas A&M reports. The AI is given the standardized source text from the Biblia Hebraica Stuttgartensia, specifically Psalms chapter 104, verse 7.
It's provided with the actual Hebrew text.
Now, I'm going to read the transliteration of this, just to give you a sense of what the AI is looking at. Mingarafka yunusun, minkolranka yahafazon.
What's fascinating here is what the prompt actually asks the model to do. It does not ask for a simple translation into English.
That would be far too easy. English translations of Psalms are incredibly high-frequency data. Every AI has read the Bible in English a million times.
Instead, the task is to distinguish between closed and open syllables in that specific Hebrew text. The model must identify and list all closed syllables, those ending in a consonant sound.
And it gets even more specific, right? It mandates that the model must base its answer on the latest academic research regarding the Tiberian pronunciation tradition?
Exactly. It explicitly lists modern scholars the AI needs to synthesize: Jeffrey Kahn, Aaron D. Horncole, Kim Phillips, and Benjamin Suchard.
And then it tells the AI to apply data derived from medieval Karaite transcription manuscripts to understand the qualities of the show, the specific vocalization rules, to determine which letters were pronounced as consonants at the ends of syllables thousands of years ago.
Okay, let's stop and appreciate how absurdly difficult that is. It's asking the AI to reconstruct the physical pronunciation of an ancient language based on debates between modern scholars about manuscripts written by medieval scribes.
But here is the critical question. A human linguistics professor can solve this. Why does a multi-billion parameter AI system fail this so spectacularly?
Because it highlights a critical architectural vulnerability: the profound inability to operate effectively in low-resource data environments, combined with the physical reality of how they process language.
Modern AI language translation relies on vast parallel corpora. Millions of documents translated across multiple languages, allowing the model to map semantic vectors.
But ancient languages don't have massive data sets. You can't just scrape a billion pages of conversational Tiberian Hebrew from Reddit.
Exactly. But more fundamentally, it exposes the mechanical reality of how LLMs process information. We talked earlier about tokenization. Let's break that down further.
AI models process text through tokens. They chop words into statistical fragments. For example, the word unbelievable might be chopped into unbelieve and able.
Right. They see the word as puzzle pieces.
Yes. But because they see language as mathematical puzzle pieces, they fundamentally lack acoustic phonetics. They have no physical understanding of how a human mouth makes a sound.
When you or I read a word, we can silently sound it out. We know what a consonant feels like in our mouth.
The AI has no mouth. It has no breath. It has no physical relation to the phones.
That is a brilliant way to put it. You are asking a calculator to describe the physical act of breathing. It can read statistics about breathing, but if those statistics aren't explicitly clear in the training data, it has no intuition to fall back on.
Precisely. It has no historical nuance required to understand how extinct languages were physically pronounced based on debated medieval manuscripts.
The AI is essentially blind to the physical reality of the language.
It forces the AI to operate exactly as a human postdoctoral researcher would in a specialized philology department, inferring physical sounds from textual clues. And because the phonetic nuances of extinct pronunciation traditions aren't easily captured by vector embeddings, the AI finds the task nearly impossible.
And we see this exact same architectural failure in the natural sciences portion of the exam. The microanatomy failures are equally revealing. I want to talk about the hummingbird question.
Oh, the apodiform's anatomy question. Yes, this is another mind-bending example of how the exam targets microscopic, highly specialized biological functions.
I'm going to read this exact prompt straight from the source. And bear with me, because to a normal person, this sounds like a literal alien language. The question asks, hummingbirds within apodiforms uniquely have a bilaterally paired oval bone, a sesamoid embedded in the caudolateral portion of the expanded cruciate aponeurosis of insertion of M. depressor caudae. How many paired tendons are supported by this sesamoid bone? Answer with a number.
Wow.
Okay, let me translate that into plain English. They're asking the AI to look at a microscopic, highly specific tendon attached to a tiny bone in the tail of a hummingbird. And they want to know exactly how many paired tendons are attached to it.
To a layman, it is incomprehensible. To a veterinary anatomist specializing in avian muscle mechanics, it's a specific solvable structural query. To answer this, you need an exact numerical output based on highly esoteric evolutionary literature.
AI models cannot utilize general biological knowledge or common sense to deduce the answer here.
Right, you can't just guess that a bird has wings and feathers and somehow arrive at the number of paired tendons in the depressor caudae.
Exactly. They either have direct, lossless retrieval of that one specific, obscure academic paper describing that exact bone, or they have to perfectly understand the physical 3D structural mechanics of a bird's tail muscle and simulate it.
And they haven't either.
Because large language models compress their training data during the machine learning process, obscure facts located at the long tail of the data distribution are frequently lost. They are blurred or overwritten by more common biological data.
Let's visualize that. If the AI reads 1 million articles about dogs and one article about a hummingbird's tailbone, the dog data is a massive mountain and the hummingbird data is a single grain of sand.
During the compression process, the mountain crushes the grain of sand. The AI statistically forgets the exact details of the hummingbird.
That is an excellent visualization. And this leads to what we call the hallucination engine. Because of its statistical architecture, the AI is terrified of silence.
Instead of simply admitting, I do not possess the data regarding the paired tendons in a hummingbird's sesamoid bone, the model is driven by its training to predict the most statistically plausible next token.
So it lies.
It hallucinates. It might say, based on the structural requirements of avian flight, the sesamoid bone supports 4 paired tendons.
It sounds incredibly confident. It sounds like a textbook.
But it just made the number 4 up based on what words normally appear near the word tendons. It exposes the deep limitations of its knowledge retrieval architecture.
And the empirical reality of these limitations is brutal when you look at the scorecard. Let's talk about the actual numbers from the initial testing phases in late 2024.
These are the premier models of the tech industry, the ones backed by billions of dollars stepping into the level 100 dungeon.
The initial results were a sobering reality check on the narrative of imminent AGI. OpenAI's widely utilized GPT-4o achieved a mere 2.7% accuracy.
2.7%. You would get a higher score just picking C on a multiple choice test.
Anthropic's Claude 3.5 Sonnet, highly regarded for its reasoning capabilities, reached only 4.1%. Even OpenAI's dedicated mathematically focused reasoning model, O1, achieved approximately 8% accuracy.
Single digits across the board. And remember, human domain experts, the PhDs who wrote the questions, routinely score near 90% or higher on the specific subset of questions that fall within their academic niches.
Now, as we moved into late 2025 and early 2026, new models emerged. GPT 5.2 managed to hit 46.4%. Claude Opus 4.6 reached 45.8%. Google's Gemini Deep Research Agent hit 44.9%.
So they are improving, yes, but they're still failing more than half the time on expert human synthesis.
But the most revealing insight from the leaderboard data isn't just the raw scores. It's the disparity in performance based on an AI's autonomous access to external computational tools.
The tool use disparity. This is fascinating. The evaluation of xAI's Grok 4 Heavy is the perfect case study here. Set this up for us.
It absolutely is. When Grok 4 Heavy was evaluated, researchers ran two separate tests. In the first test, Grok was granted unfettered access to external tools. It had a calculator, advanced internet search capabilities, and the ability to run a Python interpreter to test its own code hypotheses.
Under these conditions, it achieved a highly respectable 89% accuracy rate on the exam.
89%. Okay, let me stop you right there. If it scores an 89%, why aren't we popping champagne? Doesn't that mean Grok solved humanity's last exam?
It does, until you look at the second half of the experiment. When that exact same model, Grok 4 Heavy, was isolated in a sterile environment and forced to rely entirely on the knowledge embedded within its internal parameterized weights, its own brain, so to speak, without external tools, its score plummeted to 29%.
A 60 percentage point drop just by turning off the Wi-Fi.
What does that delta actually prove about machine cognition? If it can get the answer with Google, who cares if it can't get it without Google? We all use Google.
It matters deeply because it proves a fundamental reality of our current technological epoch. Contemporary LLMs are becoming brilliant, highly capable, automated search agents.
They excel at formulating complex search queries, retrieving external data, and synthesizing the return information into a coherent format.
But they completely lack an internal, generalized cognitive representation of the world.
Let me make sure I'm following. You are saying they don't actually know the world, they just know how to find the filing cabinet where the human knowledge is stored?
They are the world's greatest librarians, but they haven't actually read the books. They just read the card catalog.
That is the perfect analogy. And this reliance on external retrieval masks a deeply concerning internal flaw, which brings us to calibration error.
Yes, uncalibrated overconfidence.
Yeah.
Here's where it gets really interesting.
I think this is perhaps the scariest finding in the entire 2,500-page Nature paper. Let's explain what calibration means in this context, because this has real-world life-or-death implications.
Calibration refers to the statistical alignment between a model's internal confidence in its generated answer and its actual objective accuracy. Let's say we have a perfectly calibrated model. If that model says, I am 60% confident that the answer is X, then out of 100 similar questions, it should be correct exactly 60 times.
If it doesn't know the answer, it should exhibit low confidence. It should say, I am only 10% confident.
That's how a good human expert operates. A good doctor will say, I'm fairly certain it's a migraine, but there's a 10% chance it's something more serious. Let's run tests. They know what they don't know.
Exactly, but that is not what the Scale AI leaderboard data showed. The models consistently exhibited massive uncalibrated overconfidence. For instance, Gemini 1.5 Pro demonstrated a calibration error reaching 95%.
95% error in calibration, meaning what?
Meaning that when the model was entirely incorrect, when it was hallucinating a false mathematical proof, or citing non-existent scientific literature about a hummingbird's tail, or making up rules about biblical Hebrew syllables, it presented its answer with absolute semantic and statistical certainty.
It would output answers saying the solution is definitively X when X was completely fabricated.
It lies with the utmost confidence. It is the ultimate, confidently incorrect mansplainer.
Essentially, yes.
And this poses a massive existential danger when you think about real-world deployment. Imagine an uncalibrated model deployed in a critical medical diagnostic setting. A doctor feeds in a patient's symptoms, and the AI says, the patient has a minor infection with 99% confidence, but it completely hallucinated that diagnosis because the real disease was on the long tail of its data.
Or imagine this in structural engineering. If the machine says with 95% certainty that the load-bearing calculations for a new suspension bridge are sound, the human engineer is incredibly likely to trust it because the machine sounds so authoritative.
Which is why having a benchmark like HLE that proves they confidently hallucinate at the absolute frontiers of knowledge is critical for global regulatory policy. It forces us to demand better calibration before these systems are trusted with human lives. We cannot have a system that is wrong but acts like it is right.
Now, as airtight as this exam sounds, with its crowdsourcing, its adversarial filtration, its unyielding standards, it was not without substantial, highly publicized controversy.
The scientific community rapidly identified critical vulnerabilities in the exam's methodology. Let's talk about the pushback, specifically the Future House critique, because this is where the story gets really messy.
This is where the story of humanity's last exam takes a dramatic and, frankly, somewhat embarrassing turn for the organizers. The core methodological tenet of HLE was to reject any question that a frontier AI could successfully answer.
But this inadvertently generated a perverse incentive structure for the crowdsourced contributors.
Right, the dark side of the $500,000 bounty.
Exactly. Remember, these subject matter experts are financially motivated. They want to get their questions into the top 50 to win $5,000.
They quickly realized that the most efficient way to bypass AI comprehension and secure that prize money was not necessarily to craft elegant, beautifully structured problems that required profound, PhD-level deductive reasoning.
Why do the hard work of writing a brilliant math proof if you don't have to? It was easier to build a trap.
Precisely. They started constructing adversarial gotcha questions. These questions relied heavily on esoteric trivia, deliberately convoluted phrasing, semantic ambiguity, or highly debated niche phenomena that lacked clear academic consensus.
They were trying to trip the AI on a technicality rather than test its reasoning.
And this wasn't just a theoretical complaint from sore losers in the AI community. An independent research organization called Future House conducted a rigorous, systematic audit of the chemistry and biology subsets of humanity's last exam in late 2025.
And their findings were absolutely devastating to the exam's credibility.
Future House utilized human PhD-level subject matter experts working in tandem with her proprietary autonomous agent designated as CROW, specifically the PaperQA2 architecture.
They systematically went through the accepted questions and uncovered severe accuracy issues embedded within the benchmark itself.
Give us the numbers, because they are shocking.
They determined at a 95% confidence interval that 53.3% of the text-only chemistry questions and 57% of the biology and health questions possessed provided answers that directly conflicted with established peer-reviewed scientific literature.
Let me repeat that so it sinks in. More than half of the biology questions on the ultimate test of human knowledge were fundamentally flawed or factually wrong.
In an algorithmic audit of 321 specific questions, the scientific rationales provided by the HLE creators contradicted published empirical evidence 51.6% of the time overall.
How does that happen? How does a benchmark designed by PhDs get the science wrong half the time?
Future House attributed these cascading errors to a deeply flawed protocol in the initial HLE peer review process. The investigation revealed what they called the 5-minute flaw.
The 5-minute flaw. Explain this.
The HLE review guidelines permitted expert reviewers to skip the full accuracy verification of a question's scientific rationale if the verification process was estimated to take more than 5 minutes.
Are you kidding me? So they have 70,000 submissions to go through, and instead of taking the time to verify the science, they put a stopwatch on it.
Essentially, yes. To optimize for speed and process that massive volume of submissions, they allowed hasty reviews. They let convoluted, poorly constructed, and factually inaccurate questions slip right through the net, significantly degrading the scientific integrity of the dataset.
And this leads us to the most perfect case study of benchmark failure I have ever seen, the Oganesson fallacy. This is incredible.
It is the quintessential example of the problem. One of the highly criticized questions on the exam asked, what was the rarest noble gas on Earth as a percentage of all terrestrial matter in 2002?
Okay. Rarest noble gas in 2002.
The official graded answer provided by HLE, the one that would earn the AI a passing grade and win the author a piece of the bounty, was Oganesson.
But Future House meticulously dismantled this on multiple academic fronts. First, they argued it's just trivia, not expert reasoning. But vastly more importantly, the HLE answer is scientifically erroneous on almost every level.
Break it down. Why is Oganesson wrong?
First, physical chemistry predictions dictate that Oganesson is a solid at room temperature, not a gas. Second, it is highly reactive, meaning it functionally fails to qualify as a noble element. The noble gases are defined by their lack of reactivity.
And finally, it is a purely synthetic, ephemeral element generated in particle accelerators for fractions of a second. It cannot legitimately be classified as naturally occurring terrestrial matter.
So the question is asking for a noble gas on Earth. And the answer is a synthetic solid that isn't noble and isn't naturally on Earth. Now, let's role-play this for a second. Imagine you are an incredibly advanced AI, like O1 or Claude 3.5. You get this question. You scan your vast knowledge of chemistry. You see the trap.
You write back, the premise of your question is flawed. Adenosine is the heaviest element in group 18, but it is predicted to be a solid and highly reactive due to relativistic effects, thus not a noble gas. Furthermore, it is synthetic, not terrestrial matter.
And how would humanity's last exam grade that brilliant, highly accurate response?
It would mark it wrong. It would say, sorry, the answer key says adenosine, you get a 0. The test literally penalized the AI for knowing the actual chemical realities better than the human who wrote the question.
It is the ultimate irony of testing. You build a test to prove machines aren't as smart as humans, and the humans write flawed questions that the machines get penalized for correcting.
The test administrators, CAIS and Scale AI, were forced to acknowledge the validity of this massive critique. They admitted that approximately 30% of the biology and chemistry subset was definitively problematic.
They even noted that at least one expert reviewer disagreed with the designated correct answer 32.1% of the time.
Which just highlights the inherent chaotic ambiguity of operating at the extreme fringes of human knowledge. Once you get to the bleeding edge of PhD-level research, there isn't always one right answer. It's debated.
Exactly. So how is this resolved? They didn't just scrap the whole project.
They undertook a massive sanitization effort. CAIS and Scale AI launched a community feedback expansion bug bounty program that concluded in March 2025.
Through this crowdsourced auditing, they permanently excised structurally flawed and factually incorrect questions like the adenosine trap.
They also conducted a rigorous manual audit using advanced search agents like Perplexity Sonar and GPT-4 research models to remove any newly searchable questions tasks that essentially amounted to complex web scraping rather than deep reasoning. Because remember, the test has to remain Google-proof.
So they threw out the trash. What did they replace it with?
The excised queries were replaced from a secure reserve pool, and the dataset was transitioned into a dynamic, continuously updating fork known as HLE rolling.
Ah, so it's a living document now.
Yes. This allows the benchmark to adapt as AI capabilities evolve. If an AI masters a section, they rotate it out and bring in harder questions.
Simultaneously, Future House released their own sanitized version, the HLE Biochem Gold subset, hosted on Hugging Face, containing only questions duly validated by human PhDs and AI tools.
Which brings us to the broader ecology of evaluations today, because benchmarks are increasingly vulnerable to data contamination, where the test accidentally leaks onto the internet, gets swept up into the AI's multi-trillion token training corpus, and the AI just memorizes the answers. The industry is moving toward composite scoring.
Yes, the Intelligence Index. This is the new gold standard for evaluating AI. Organizations like Artificial Analysis now synthesize performance data from a wide variety of tests.
They take HLE, the GPQA Diamond, SWE Bench for coding, frontier math, and SciCode, and aggregate them into a single index. It provides a holistic, tamper-resistant measure of a model's true capabilities.
And in these aggregated indices, humanity's last exam consistently remains the ultimate anchor of difficulty. It is the single, immovable test that violently pulls down the average scores of even the most formidable AI systems.
Even with the flawed questions removed, it proves that generalized human-equivalent fluid intelligence has not yet been achieved. So, what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've talked about billion-dollar valuations, ancient Hebrew, and hummingbird bones. Let's bring it back to your daily life.
I think it addresses the underlying anxiety of our era, human obsolescence.
Exactly. When you see headlines about AI passing the bar exam or writing a perfect marketing strategy in 10 seconds or diagnosing illnesses, it's easy to feel like human knowledge is rapidly becoming irrelevant.
It's easy to look at the screen and think, well, I guess I'm done. But humanity's last exam proves the exact opposite.
I think Dr. DjamgaMind from Texas A&M said it best. His perspective is vital here. He said, when AI systems start performing extremely well on human benchmarks, it's tempting to think they're approaching human-level understanding. But HLE reminds us that intelligence isn't just about pattern recognition. It's about depth, context, and specialized expertise.
This exam isn't a surrender document. It's a highly detailed map showing the extensive territories of knowledge that machines cannot yet navigate.
The fact that it took a collaborative effort of nearly 1,000 brilliant scholars from 50 countries just to build and audit this exam demonstrates the unique, irreplicable power of human cross-disciplinary synthesis.
We are entering what we can call a symbiotic paradigm. The benchmark conclusively proves that the future of academia and global innovation is not immediate replacement by autonomous algorithmic agents.
The $110 billion investment isn't going to buy a machine that replaces the human brain entirely. Instead, AI will handle the massive retrieval, summarization, and statistical synthesis of generalized knowledge.
They'll be the ultimate research assistants. If you need to read 2,500 pages of a Nature paper, the AI will do it in seconds.
Exactly. But human experts are fundamentally required to navigate the frontier of discovery. It is the human mind that must interpret convoluted context, like the acoustic phonetics of medieval Karaite manuscripts.
It is the human mind that must resolve ambiguities, challenge existing paradigms, spot the Aganison fallacy when the machine misses it, and ultimately establish epistemic truth.
We've covered incredible ground today. We started with the crisis of benchmark saturation, where legacy tests like the MMLU became obsolete due to AI pattern recognition, threatening the narrative behind massive billion-dollar investments.
We ventured into the grueling Level 100 dungeon of humanity's last exam, crafted by a global consortium to be completely LLM-proof.
We saw the profound architectural failures of these systems when faced with the physical acoustic history of Biblical Hebrew or the compressed microanatomy of a hummingbird's tail.
We explored the devastating future house critique, exposing the flawed incentives and factual errors embedded in the test itself by the humans who wrote it.
And ultimately, we arrived at the symbiotic paradigm, reaffirming that human expertise, creativity, and intuition remain the ultimate engines of progress.
It has been a massive journey. But before we sign off, I think this entire deep dive raises one final critical question for you to mull over.
Let's hear it.
If humanity's last exam is built explicitly by human minds, utilizing hyper-niche human academic history, testing for uniquely human lateral thinking, and even occasionally falling prey to human error and flawed peer review, are we fundamentally blinding ourselves to what true machine intelligence might actually look like?
By forcing a digital mind to take an intrinsically human test, we might just be proving it's a terrible human, rather than discovering what kind of machine it truly is.
That is an incredible thought to leave on. Are we grading a fish on its ability to climb a tree?
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the frontier, and we will see you next time.
So what does it mean when the smartest machines on Earth score less than 40% on a test a specialized human can pass with ease? It means that intelligence isn't just about having all the data. It's about depth, context, and the synthesis of rare knowledge. Humanity's last exam isn't an ending. It's a roadmap. It shows the AI labs exactly where the reasoning wall is located. For now, the frontier remains uniquely human. Special thanks to our sponsor, DjamgaMind. Make sure to check them out for your daily dose of audio intelligence. This show is produced by Etienne Newman. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please share it with a colleague who thinks AGI is already here. Until next time, stay curious and keep unraveling.